Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online, you're now watching the UK's only alternative late-night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Guy Needler. Now, Guy has always been aware of the greater reality being around him. However, it wasn't until his spiritual awakening in his late 30s that he devoted his work to spiritualism. Since then, Guy has gained his Reiki Masters and has trained in energy and vibrational therapy techniques. Now, he's the author of a number of books, including The History of God, The Origin Speaks, Beyond the Source Part 1 and 2, Avoiding Karma, and his latest book, The Anne Dialogues, Communications with the Ascended. Now, this book is based upon the dialogues Guy had with his late wife, Anne. Guy Needler, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's always a delight to be together with you on one of your shows. The Moore Show is... it's an icon, basically, and it's going to be an even bigger icon in the future.
Oh, I love you already. Thank you. Well, you know, we've been together a number of times on interviews in different locations, and I've always appreciated your company. I always remember that time, well, I remember two times actually, but one that sticks out more for some reason is the time that you came to Cardiff and we did a late night interview on a radio station that we had converted for our use for our show, Radio Cardiff. I really enjoyed that. That was with, I think, The History of God. I think it was.
I think it may have been a combination of The History of God and Beyond the Source Book 1.
So it was yes, it was a combination, wasn't it? Yes. And how much has changed for you since then? So much has changed. You know, at that time, I remember that Anne had only recently passed, I believe. It was probably less than a year, maybe. Would you say?
I think it was probably less than 6 months, actually, because I mean, strangely enough, I was looking at some of the the posts on the website, and one of them was the photograph we had of us both at Cardiff, and I looked at the date and I thought, wow, that was, you know, literally only a couple of months after Anne passed, and at that point I didn't know that I was going to write this particular book. It was that was still a surprise to come. That was, to be honest.
Absolutely, I think you were still grieving as well. I mean, you know, no matter what gifts you have, you know, it doesn't take away the pain. It didn't take away the pain, did it?
No, even I mean, we talked about it then as well, and you know, it's an ongoing process. Even though, I mean, I've got a new partner now, and she's a wonderful lady. She's understands a lot. She's very forgiving, but she's also very guiding as well. So she's got her own strengths there, which are helping me move on in a completely different way, but still maintaining the core sort of mainstream work that I'm doing. She's making me have more time for myself and understanding that there needs to be more time to work with the self and be more centered and being than be sort of off and away with the fairies, so to speak.
Yeah.
but even now, I mean, like how long was it? It's about 3 years, 2 months later. There's still little times when there's a tear in your eye, so to speak. And one of the things that we do notice is, and I've spoken to a number of individuals who've lost their partners, but both spiritual individuals and normal individuals who aren't so spiritual. And they all say that even though you've got a new sort of partner, and I've been with Celia now nearly a year, you never stop loving the person that you spend that length of time with. You can't wipe out 27 years of life with somebody in one go. Although most of what you do does that. You're removing bits of clothing from the house. You remove things like bank accounts, and the first sort of month and a half is a bit of a nightmare, because everything you're doing is eradicating that they ever existed on the planet. And even now we're still sorting out bits and pieces of stuff that were predominantly Anne's, although it was we were both together. And so it's a case of you're always reducing that physicality that you had together. The memories stay the same, but again, new memories come into play, so that the memories of where you were, although they're still powerful, and they should still be powerful, and they should still be with you, become a much smaller set of memories as you start to grow new memories with a new life that you're creating, and a new life with a new person you're creating as well. And so it should be. And I'm fortunate that I can still communicate with Anne, and my new partner is very, very sensitive as well in terms of her own ability to be connected to source and the greater reality, and she picks up Anne quite a lot as well. And there's no sort of competition there. It's just knowing and understanding that being is still around when it needs to be, when it wants to be, or when it has to be. And it's quite interesting, because I thought that when the book finished, that Anne would have moved on totally. And although I think mostly she has, there's still a little part here, because I think there's still some little bits of work that need to be done, that need that level of guidance from her side of the frequencies, so to speak. And the book, when I started it, the book came from nowhere really, because I was just finishing off The Origin Speaks, and I was wondering about which particular direction I was going to go into. And I mean, this was probably 2 or 3 chapters before I got to the end of it, and I was thinking, well, I do know a number of titles and a number of sort of subject matters that I need to go through, and I was prepared. I was very prepared to go down those roads, continuing the same sort of theme, so to speak. Because there's a number of there's 2 more books I've got to do that are really in the theme of the books I've currently got, which are The History of God Beyond the Source, books 1 and 2. And the Origin Speaks, the Avoiding Karma book being a sort of a standalone book. But there's 2 other books which are on the same theme. And I was set on doing those. And then all of a sudden, I'm told that no, that's not going to be the case. You've got to write about my experiences in the post and pre-incarnation process and what we do. And so the Anne Dialogues is basically all about what she's experienced during her physical demise, and how she's become more expansive, and the information she understands now about what we do as aspects of our true energetic selves or higher selves in the planning stage, and the other beings we get involved with in terms of being our guide and helpers, and what happens to us, and how we can commune with our higher self, and what happens if we do things like commit suicide, or what happens when we give drugs to help people pass. And the information was amazing. It was a level that I didn't expect. It was constantly making my eyes raise upwards, because although we think we understand the incarnation process, and there's plenty of books out there, and I thought, well, there doesn't need to be another book out there of this genre, because it's covered. But it clearly wasn't. and there was a lot of other information there that was using known subject headings, so to speak, but took it to a whole new depth.
Right.
And I do know there's more depth to go, but to be honest, the depth that was there was enough.
Well, thank you for sharing all that you've just done there as well, especially with, the process of time as a healer, and these hard things that we have to do when someone does pass, and that process that you had to go through, and I appreciate you sharing that. It's never an easy thing. Did you and Anne ever discuss her passing?
Not directly, no. Although what we did do, I mean, this is years before she did pass, we did say that we try and get in contact with each other. And that was it. We sort of mentioned it and then forgot it. And we never, you would have thought that we'd have discussed it in the last sort of couple of weeks of her life. But we didn't think, even at that point, because she'd been on the edge a few times with this brain tumor that she had, we didn't think that this was the last one. Although I started to suspect it because things were going in a different way, and we never got a chance to say, don't forget to try and contact me in some way. And so it was a bit of a sort of, I suppose, I'm going to use the word a bit sort of an angry shout whilst in meditation. The day she died, I mean, she died at sort of 12:30 into Christmas Eve, so it was not a particularly timely exit, so to speak. But I was meditating in the morning, and I said, "Look, go and give me a sign." And I was really strongly meditating on it, and then I felt a presence. But I felt a presence after there was some physical interaction. And that physical interaction was the activation of an electronic toy that she'd bought me years ago that I'd completely forgotten had existed. And this toy was basically an electronic bottle opener. And when you put the bottle opener onto the bottle to take the lid off the bottle, it played a tune, and it played a Christmas tune. And I'd completely forgotten where this thing was. And this thing started to work.
Wow.
And it was when I found it, because I couldn't work out what it was or where it was at first. When I eventually found it, it was in an old antique cigar box that we used to keep crystals in. But this particular cigar box, which were hand-me-down sort of inheritances from my great grandfather, had no crystals in at all. It had just got this electronic beer bottle opener or beer can opener, and that's what it was. And it went off 5 or 6 times during the morning.
Yeah.
And I immediately when that happened, I was like really grateful, and I ran downstairs and grabbed my digital camera, because I know that digital cameras operate on a higher frequency than the physical eye. And so I went around and took pictures of the bedroom in various different locations. And other than getting a bit of camera flash and reflection from some of the mirrors in the room, I did eventually, not straight away. This is the interesting thing, that I didn't spot the orbs that were there straight away. Whether they were there and I didn't notice them because I was getting distracted by these flashes from the mirror. Or the sort of the light projected from the mirrors after the flash, I don't know, but later on I noticed that there was some really big orbs, really clear structured orbs in these images that I'd taken, and they were in the places I was sensing where she was, and that for me was the start of the sort of the contact that was there.
That must have been so difficult, though. I mean, what was your Christmas day like then? I mean, it must have been such a hard day for you, was it not?
It was difficult because what we got into the habit of doing is going to a local pub restaurant and going with Anne's parents and my parents. Well, my mother had died in the end of January 2012, and Anne's father had died in the November of 2011, and so we were reduced down to my mother-in-law and my father, and they're both not particularly well in terms of their own health, and so Anne had booked this this meal, and basically we just went, but we took we took the little presents that we were going to take there anyway beforehand, and a photograph of her as well. So it was as if she was there anyway. Although at that point in time, I think she was just working out and getting her feet again in terms of becoming more energetic. So it was a bit of a strange day, to be honest. It was strange.
I think most people would have struggled with that day so badly, but I suppose your truth helped you through it.
It did, but again, the human side of it is a very difficult thing to recognise in terms of the spiritual base. People think that because you're a spiritual individual and you know and understand everything that is happening around you, from a spiritual perspective, and you communicate with Source or God, and you communicate with these other beings and entities, that the passing of a loved one is going to be matter of fact and not a problem. But we still miss the physical aspect. We still miss the physical side of them, and that's the bit. And actually, it's the loss. It's our loss that we grieve, not the fact that they've moved on. It's the physical presence of them that we grieve. Yes. And so it is quite difficult, even if they're spiritual individuals. And I do know that when I read a book by Paramahansa Yogananda called Autobiography of a Yogi, and I was very interested to note that in one of the part of the book where he talks about his brother dying and his mother dying, although he himself was a very aware and awake individual, he had the same, and when his own guru died as well, his own teacher, he had the same physical feelings or the emotions associated with loss and bereavement. And so it's a human thing. We all have to go through it. There isn't anybody, no matter how spiritually evolved they are, that's here that doesn't have to experience the immersion associated with being incarnated. Yeah. And so we have to go through this, and one of the funny things is, I may have mentioned it in that January 2013 interview. Was it January or February? Can't remember. In that interview, I do remember saying that the bereavement process is something we have to go through, and that I felt very strongly and bizarrely that I've never experienced bereavement at all, not just in this life, but in previous lives. So for me, that was even now, I recognise it as a gift from Anne, that I've experienced something that I hadn't experienced before.
Right.
And it really started to unlock the emotional contents that I'd sort of locked down over the years of when she was ill. Because when she started to become ill, I was only just starting to write or think about writing some of the bits and pieces for the history of God. I didn't even think of it as being a book then. But at that point, when somebody's ill, you lock down your emotions and you sort of start to work and do the best you can for them whilst they're alive, and you try and make things as normal as possible. Yeah. And so after her demise, as it were, my the emotional content started to come out again. So it's
okay.
In some respects, it's opened me up more as well as a result of that, because the emotions are part of our communication medium.
Of course, and that's an important point of why we're here. You know, we're here to experience emotions as well. You know, we can't deny any aspect of ourselves. We really can't. You know, we're here to have a human experience as well. And like you say, everything that you've been through is part of that. And you know, you can't be lost too much in, you know, what the potential is of where we're off to once we pass, because it is still about being here. You know, that potential of where we cross over to is you know, can we bring in information to this present moment that makes it more makes our truth better for us, and you know, makes our time here just more lovable to each other and lovable to ourselves. But yes, not to deny any part of us, and to have fun as well and have a laugh. You know, even talking about these subjects, you know, life spirituality isn't about being serious.
Absolutely, it's about having fun while we're here. I mean, we didn't invent fun. Our creator created the fun aspect of it, and the joy and the love associated with it. Yeah. And it's, you know, we always think that people should live a long life, and you know, the efficiency of living a long life is not specifically there, because as you get older, although if one of us or a number of us may have wanted to experience decrepitude or loss of function, or loss of bodily function as we get older, and that may be part of our life plan. In essence, if we've achieved what we needed to achieve while we're here, we don't need to stay here and be here. And I was speaking with one of my sort of level 3 students and friend, and on Tuesday, he was saying that there's lots of people leaving the planet. There's lots of people going, not just famous people, because there's a whole host of famous people have left in the last sort of month. But he's saying lots of people around us are going early. And you think, well, actually, are they going early, or they finished their jobs? And you think, so well, they've actually finished. So if they're finished, and there's no other part of their life plan, or there's no need to experience certain levels of physicality, then why not go? Why not return back to the energetic rather than staying here? And so we have to accept that sometimes people do want to go early, and it's not a case of they've been denied a long and fruitful life. It's that they've done it. They've done what they needed to achieve, and they're getting out. And so there's nothing wrong with that at all. And so we should respect and the fact that people do leave early, and love them for it as well.
Absolutely. And what was the reaction from the family when they knew that you were communicating with Anne?
Well, it's interesting because my side of the family really weren't. Even my mother was a little bit spiritual, but not really heavy, not really sort of heavily into it. She sort of understood what I was doing, but couldn't discuss it. My father is very materialistic, very sort of materially based, and my brother is even more so. On Anne's side, so really, my father's my only sort of close blood relative that's still here, and he doesn't understand what I'm doing at all. And that's okay. He knows it's he knows that I have a job to do, and I'm doing the job, and it's helping people, and also bringing a bit of financial support in as well. And so he's happy with that. On Anne's side, it was only her father that was really into it at the same level as Anne was, and myself. And although her mother was, and still is, she's still alive, she's still with us, she would discuss certain things with us. You could tell that there wasn't any real sort of desire to know more. It was just that it was part of a conversation, and she would join in. And the same with my brother-in-law. He's not so interested in it as Dennis was or Anne was. And so really we were, other than Dennis, my father-in-law, we really were sort of just the two of us, and just Dennis. And so when I talked to them about talking with Anne about the various different subjects about the incarnation process, it sort of, they listen to me, but then they move on to another subject quite quickly. Okay. So it's going to be interesting when the book is finally published, and I always give them a copy of the books I've written, or been fortunate enough to work with different entities to channel the information to write. It'll be interesting to see if they have any emotional sort of response to it, or whether they actually do sit down and read them. Because I don't think they read the books, to be honest. I think they accept them as gifts and they go on the bookshelf. So. Yeah,
but that's what and that's where they're at, and there's nothing wrong with that. Because that's their, that's we're all experiencing and having different experiences, and that's just what they're experiencing and what their level of consciousness, which I don't when we talk about higher and lower levels of consciousness, I don't really like to see it just as that. I'm pretty much seeing it as choices. Yeah, we the material that you may present is just not the right choice for them at that time.
And it's a different angle to what I've previously done. I mean, the Avoiding Karma book was a different angle as well, and so for me, it's almost like a bridging book between what people want to know and hear about, and those who are understanding my existing work, who want to see that and read in the genre that I've currently presented to the sort of spiritual sort of environment and world, the difference between what I've understood in the incarnation process and how it relates to my existing levels of information, and how the two intermix. So it's a bit, and how the two intermix. So it's a bit of a bridging book in that respect.
Right.
Clearly, the information is of a different genre and different content to what we already know. Although there are some, when I looked at and remembered what people generally know about incarnation, there's clear subject headings which carry over, which are clearly a commonality between various different authors, various different levels of understanding, various depths of understanding. But as we rise through the frequencies and we become more capable of delving deeper into the information, we by default start to get a clearer definition of what we're seeing. And the way I like to portray this is that if we have a sight dysfunction, we have glasses to correct our vision, but we can only see within a certain distance based upon the quality of our eyes and the quality of the glassware that we have in for our glasses. If we want to see further, we get a good pair of binoculars. If we want to see even further, we get a good telescope. If we want to see even further, we start to use different technologies to see further. And it's a little bit like the higher up the frequencies we go, the further we can see. We're given different gifts.
Right.
Like, for instance, we're given binoculars rather than glasses. We're given a telescope rather than binoculars. We're given X-ray based telescopes rather than a standard sort of light based telescope. We as we progress upwards, we see more. We see more depth. We see more detail as well. And it's the same with electron microscopes, for instance. We can see real microscopically small items. And again, with our level of spirituality, as we progress, we can see greater depth, and that's where we are right now with this particular book. It's seeing more depth that has always been there, but just hasn't been picked up by people,
right,
because of their own abilities.
So okay. What I've been told in my channeling is that there's ultimate truths, in the sense that and different levels, different truths, and we all have our own individual unique truth. And even when you cross over, they're still trying to work out their truth, in a sense. So you say, and I know we're going to get into it as well, that there's aspects, lots of aspects in this information, in the sense that it has not been said in this way before, or even new information. But there will probably be books in the future that will come out that will even surpass this, in a sense, when the reader is ready for it, or when that information is ready to come through. Could you go down that road?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I see the work I do as the next stepping stone. People are either attracted to it or not. They either reject it, or they can't get enough of it, and it just depends upon where they are. And so people progress in their own way. But I can see, I already know of a couple of people who have the potential to take my work on the history of God and the Beyond the Source books and the Origin Speaks, and not discounting the Avoiding Karma or the one I've just finished, the Dialogues. I can see them going beyond that and in deep, greater detail, greater depth, and greater levels of experience whilst gathering the information.
Right.
So I just see my work as being a stepping stone, basically, for people to go onwards and upwards later.
Okay. And something funny happened to me the other day with an interview, and it's really made me think. And I haven't gone back into channeling for a week or more, and I haven't even gone back to ask this question back to it. it was very interesting what this guy had to say. A guy called Vincent Jenner, a psychic medium, and a channel as well. But what he had to say was, and you give me your opinion on this, is that we don't love ourselves enough to really be true to ourselves, to say that when we are channeling, really what we're channeling is our higher self. So when we say we're channeling God, we are God. We are all that. But there is no separation. When someone says they're channeling crying, they are crying. Really, it's just they're not. They've never really trusted themselves to go beyond that level, to see beyond that level. That actually it was them. They're not ready to see that side of their channeling, and it's easier for them to say that it's something separate from them. Just to say that's bringing the information out, not to say it's them, because to say it's them gives them, it's too empowering potentially, and they won't want to admit that. So when you say you're channeling the source or whatever it is you have been channeling, separate to Anne, because I think that this type of channeling is Anne. But when you say you're channeling beyond the source and all these other entities, could you even go down the road? Is it possible in your understanding that maybe at some very level that you've not thought about, this actually is you?
That's one of the fundamental truths that I've understood for quite a long time, is that although we work with different entities, we channel source, we channel other beings that source creates, we channel other beings called source entities that were created by the ultimate creator, the origin. At the end of the day, we're all component parts of that ultimate being, and therefore by default we are that ultimate being. It's just that we have the benefit of, and probably the luck to be, individualized as a smaller function of it. And so whereas most individuals on the planet Earth are individualized aspects of their higher self, those higher selves are individualized aspects of source, and those individualized aspects of our creator are smaller aspects of our creator's creator. And so we have this structure there where we see the very small parts of us, which are the soul in the physical form, and there can be smaller parts as well called shards, but that's something that comes out in the Anne dialogues, by the way. We have this structure of going from the small to the large, and actually we're all still part of the large. We are just smaller individualized aspects of this greater being called the origin, who have various different roles to play in the investigation of self. And if you think of it in terms of our physical form, our human body, every single quark within us has a role to play, but it's a function of a larger structure, the subatomic structure. Every part of the atoms, the atomic structure, has a part to play, but then a smaller function of the cellular structure, and then the cells have got their own part to play, and they're a smaller part of a bigger function, like, for instance, a liver or a heart or a kidney, and then they're a smaller function of a bigger function, which is the body. And so we are, right down from the very top to the bottom, we're all the same being, basically. It's just that there's smaller parts of it, smaller component parts.
Yeah, and I'm not being. This is just really. This is this will lead into where we're going with channeling, and it's just so for example, okay, so if I'm channeling my arm. Yeah, and I call it conversations with arm. Yeah, it's still part of me. Yeah, it still knows the greater reality as I do. It's no separate from me. But then, why? But are we moving past a paradigm potentially that, if we look at it like this, that maybe, are we able to give the power back? Is it egotistic to give the power back to ourselves that actually, Kevin Moore channels, or Kevin Moore channels arm? Is it more egotistic for me to say that it's me, or is it or by having that separation, does that separate the ego? I mean,
well, the function of us saying that we are channeling somebody or something is a result of our incarnate state, where we lose the connectivity, the communicative bandwidth associated with being in a lower frequency environment and a very slow-moving, low-frequency environment at that. And so we individualize ourselves through the lack of communication with what we truly are. So it's a human condition to think that we are individual. It's a human condition to think that we are the human body and there is nothing else, and we're not part of anything else. But when we move away from the human body and we start to realize that actually the human body is just a vehicle, like a motor car, that we're using to experience this particular environment in the way it's supposed to be experienced, for instance, experiencing different sensations, behaviors, actions, resistances, joys, pains, loves, heartaches, all of these different things. That if we move away from that, then we do start to work in the correct way, in a higher frequency way, or a more spiritual way, if you want to call it that. Then we start to realize that we are actually a smaller function of this much bigger thing. So to empower ourselves and say that we are God or we are origin is not wrong. It's just that we've got this paradigm that's created by being incarnate that suggests that we are individualized and we are separate from God. And in some areas of the world, they say that a true Christian, for instance, or a true person must fear God. Well, why would you fear something that you are? So it is a paradigm shift without doubt. You're absolutely right there, Kevin, that we need to move away from this thought process that we are individualized into the human body, and that's everything else is either completely mumbo jumbo or is beyond the strange and therefore can't or shouldn't exist. And we should start to realize that actually we are God, we are origin.
Yeah.
We are part of a much bigger environment, and therefore, because we are part of it, that environment is us as well.
Well, could you ever do a book that would be Guy Needler, Channel's Guy Needler?
I think it's entirely possible, but it's whether people would want to relate to it and could work with it. Interestingly enough, I know that Neil Walsh, for instance, has done a number of books where he's just writing about certain things and the way things are working. And I think it was in the Origin Speak, some point of it, I was told that there will be a time where I'm working without the need to refer to a higher body or a higher entity, to have because that higher entity gives us the permission, so to speak, to say that it's bona fide.
That's right, because you are that higher entity.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And I'm sort of picking up now that, you're right. There's going to be a time when that's more acceptable, where people won't think that, that author's gone, lost his direction or goes off his trolley because he's now thinking that he is God. Well, actually, we are God anyway. We are origin. It's just that we forget that because the communicative bandwidth or loss of it when we incarnate.
Yeah.
And so at some point we will get to the point where that's acceptable to do so and acceptable to move in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And see, coming back to your work, I'm not taking anything away from your work. I really respect your work, Guy, absolutely, and it speaks volumes for itself. It really does, right? You don't need anyone else to say it. Read the material. You'll see it, all the quality of it there. And I think you attract the audience that seems to be right for you right now, and other people do the same. Yet there seems to be a lot of people reading a lot of different material from different people nowadays as well. And this is probably only a question, but it's just going on this theme. You look at the Jane Roberts material with Seth. Potentially, Seth could have been her higher self. Potentially. Yeah.
Well, if you think of it again using the logic that we've just worked with, and the paradigm we've just worked with, Seth would be a function of or an aspect of Source or God, irrespective of whether it was a part of her higher self or part of her Godhead, depending on the words you want to use, or whether Seth was God itself. At the end of the day, if Seth is part of the bigger being, and we're part of the bigger being that we are, then she is Seth, and Seth is God. all in one, and there's no difference.
It gets a bit complicated for me in some sense. Just in this moment now, where I think, well, okay, I've been, experimenting with channeling, and I've been told that I'm going to be channeling higher dimensional beings. But then, if I'm now going on the road of thinking that, well, is this all Kevin? Is this me? I'm channeling with that aspect of me that's past that's the consciousness that's in this other reality, that with this much greater connection to everything. But when it's saying to me that we're going to channel higher levels, am I part of all those higher levels? Has part of me already crossed onto those higher levels? It makes no sense really in this moment right now talking to you. I don't get it, because it's almost like, well, if I am channeling higher levels of myself, well, what is why am I still here? do you know what I mean? Or is that because everything's instantaneous? It's all happening at the same time. There is no time in that sense, obviously.
Well, everything is happening concurrently in the same space, so to speak. He said, avoiding the use of the word time. But we have to think of it in terms of if you have a spoonful of syrup, and you tip that spoonful of syrup, and a little piece of that syrup drips down, the bigger body of syrup is still there, but the smaller part of that syrup that drips down. This is what this. You look at it in terms of the bigger body of syrup being our higher self, and the smaller body of syrup that's dripping down being the soul that's projected into the physical. That's what we are. So although we have created an ego, a separate personality, through this lack of communicative bandwidth between this larger spoon of syrup and the smaller drip of syrup, it's still connected. It's still there. And so taking that in terms of our higher self, or our true energetic self, the Hindus called it the oversoul, the Hindus call it the Godhead, that is still in one of these frequential states within one of the dimensions within the multiverse. It's still there. It's part of the structure of the source. So it's still there. It's just that it's a smaller part of it is projected down into a lower frequency. And so it's still connected. There's still you able to work with these other beings who are part of this structure that your higher self's located within. And of course, because these are individualized functions of a bigger being, you are still part of this bigger being, but you have a little role to play, like a heart cell has a role to play within the heart. It's either vein, or it's muscle, or it's valve. So there's different things there. So to say that things are separate is a human term, because the lack of ability for us to understand that we are actually a much bigger being. And when we demise, we'll get this rush of information, and all of a sudden we'll start to remember who and what we truly are, and come back to it. But one of the things that's interesting, you said about talking about channeling yourself, Guy Needler channeling Guy Needler, for instance, or Kevin Moore channeling Kevin Moore, is that there are a number of times when I have to sit back and think and work out and make sure that what I'm picking up is real, and it's not me talking to myself. But if you look at it, actually, we are talking to ourselves, because we're talking to a higher function of what we are. What we're basically saying is that the information is always there. It's just that this little part of us that's squeezed into a small vessel, yes, which is lower frequency, so lower frequency that the communication's disappeared. It's a bit like using an old dial-up modem from the 1980s compared to the supposedly super fast gigastream of broadband we can get in big corporations now. So the instantaneous communication versus having to wait for hours and hours and hours to download a few kilobytes of data is the difference between what we are when we're disincarnated compared to how our communication with the rest of us is whilst we're incarnated. And so we lose that communicative ability, and because of that we forget who and what we are. So really everything that we're channeling and we're writing down in books and presenting to the wider spiritual public who are interested, or at the level of advancement or evolution whilst incarnate, to be able to understand those concepts and work with them and progress with them and probably take them further, is always there. It's never gone. it's not new information. It's just existing information. It's just that we are detached from it because of our lack of communicative bandwidth, and that's it. It's always there, in other various different depths and levels of understanding as well.
Yeah. Now, obviously, this interview is about Anne, and I'm trying to keep it focused on that. Obviously, and I know it may seem that we've gone 360, but it's to give the basis as well. There's some real foundation to this, I think. Now, when you talk about channeling Anne, for me, you are channeling Anne. That's not that's just my understanding right now. It's not so much your higher self. It's not you channeling Guy Needler. This even though it is all one. You and Anne and everything else is all one. But she is very separate, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean, it's an individualized personality, if you want to call it that, or energetic signature that's assigned to a certain piece of sentience that uses a body of energy to work with, or not as the case may be. And so that level of sentience, that level of sentient energy that is now disincarnate, has experienced certain experiences over a number of different incarnations, of no doubt. And so that gives its personality a different signature compared to the larger set of energies that are source. And as with our human body, whereas the atomic structure associated with a liver cell is different to the atomic structure associated with a brain cell, for instance, or a neuron or whatever. It's the same sort of thing. It's still part of this bigger body, but it's got its own individuality based upon what it's worked on, what it's been allowed to work on, what it's wanted to work on. And so communicating with Anne on the information that it wanted to give me is although it's still a much bigger part of me. I mean, Anne is me and I am Anne, and Source is me and Source is Anne and Source is you, and same with Origin. It's the individuality of that particular piece of source sensitive sentience that is able to give a different perspective on the environment that it finds itself in. And so when we start to work with Anne and gain the information about how it as a sentient energy works with other sentient energies to plan experiences in different environments, and we start to see how those plans work and how the interaction between different entities works, we start to see that there's a different picture, and that is that everything has a function within source. No matter how small the sentience, how small the energy that's been assigned sentience, everything has a function. Everything is designed around understanding itself and experiencing itself in myriad different ways. And so the work with the Anne dialogues is just an understanding of how we happen to be doing it at the moment, so to speak, and how we're working with each other, how the different parts of this sentient energy that are fortunate enough to enjoy an individualized state, or should I say, a level of experience that creates a sort of individuality, is working in the opportunity to incarnate in lower frequencies right now. And eventually we'll move beyond this. We won't need to come down this low. We won't want to work with this particular frequency set. And so the plans that are there, the interactions that are there, the different roles and responsibilities of different entities or different sentient energies are there. You know, the different looking at the different types of feedback that we have to go through, the different observing how the different helpers have behaved, or how they've performed, how the guides have performed, what they've missed, what they haven't missed, how they kind of responded to things that they should have communicated to us, and how we've missed those communications, or how we've turned left rather than right, and all the different event spaces that we could have created and how they work with those, because we do work in parallel conditions as well. How the absolute opportunity for having an efficient incarnation, an efficient experience is met, is expressed in this particular book. And so understanding things like the life review in the terms of what Anne's given me isn't just a life review going to see a cinema screen of your physical life. It's to do with understanding a whole group of different levels of detail.
Yeah.
What the different parallel existences created, how we worked with that, how the different guides worked with it, how the helpers managed to work with that, how they changed some of the routes, how some of these converged or diversified as well.
Well, that's the thing about this book, isn't it? This is a whole different way of looking at the whole process. You're not going to read this book and put it down and think that it's the same information that you may need to hear anyway. If you were reading a book that's the same information, maybe you never listened to it in the first place. Yeah. But this one's different. This is like I would say it's very high level information.
It's high level information. But fortunately, some of the subject headings that we delve into are quite commonly understood and known. So that bridges the gap between what people currently understand and want to understand as the levels of further detail. I mean, things like understanding what happens to us if we commit suicide, for instance, or we terminate an incarnation too early, and we move outside of our life plan is bizarre. The amount of the fact that we enter into evolutionary debt with all of these other beings that we're supposed to have worked with, and is phenomenal. And we have to recuperate all that evolutionary debt for them, not just ourselves. So there's also, it's all like, there's no sort of, well, this is wrong to do this. It's like, this is what happens if you do go down this route. And the same with trying to help people when their body is demising, giving them sedatives and things. It all slows down the process of decoupling the soul from the energies associated with the gross physical and the spiritual and physical aspect of our human form. So it's all, there's all of these things that are there that we haven't been able to get access to before. That are allowing us to understand more, yes, change our paradigm, grow, and later on somebody else will work upon this particular stepping stone and go further.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the right. This new information is only coming out now because now's the right time for it. I truly do believe. There's a lot of chapters in this book. There's so much information. Just very briefly, then, what was the crossing light for Anne? Was it the same as it is for most people when they talk about the tunnel, the light? Did she move through that process, or was that even different?
Well, without ego here, she basically was ejected out of her body because I was with her, and I gave her energy to go, and she moved through. But there is a description of why we get this near-death experience of going through this tunnel of light, and if I've got time, I'll very, 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 very quickly discuss it and explain it. Basically, we come down from a much bigger being. It's like a body of energy is projected down, and he goes through a protective layer, a very small energetic tube that we call the Hara line, and that protects the connection between our higher self and us, so it doesn't disappear because of the low frequencies. And so we come down this Hara line into a place called the Tantien, which is a distribution point for energies. It sits about 3 inches above the navel and 3 inches in towards the centre of the body. And then from there, our energies go everywhere, to different chakras, to different bodily functions, to control and animate the body. And then the essence of what we are, our sentience, moves out from that area and sits in an area that Barbara Brennan calls the soul seat, which is just behind the heart chakra. And so that's where our essence of being is, our sentience is. But when we die, all of the essence of self, the sentience, goes back towards the Tantien. All of the energies that were in the different major, minor, and mini chakras to animate the body start to move back towards the soul's this area where the soul is distributed, the Tantien, and it goes back up this Hara line back towards our true energetic self, our higher self, and this is like a protective vortex, a protective tube. And so it appears that if we're fortunate enough to remain conscious while our soul or our aspect of our higher self is moving out of the body, we do get this impression of moving through this tunnel, this protective energies to make sure the connectivity between higher self and soul is maintained. And then when we go through that, you get this passage of going through into a big body of light, and that's moving back into the energies associated with where the the true energetic self or the higher self is residing within the structure of the multiverse. And so we get this experience of bright white light because the energies of such higher frequency, and we're still thinking in human terms, and it takes little bit of time to recalibrate who and what we are. And so we start to get this expansion of beingness, an expansion of memory, expansion of capability, expansion of function that's associated with this recoupling up to, or in one of 6 different ways, recommuning with our higher self. And so this is the normal function that people go through, and Anne would have gone through and did go through that, but in a very, very accelerated way. She was basically ejected out of the body because of the effect of sedatives, the drugs, and morphine and the painkillers, that sort of stuff that she had. That reduces the frequency and keeps the soul and the body a bit longer than it should be there. Because the association with the physical takes normally about 3 days to decouple, although the sentience goes fairly instantly. It's just the association with the lower frequencies takes a bit of time to sort of meander back to the higher self. But that's the basic function. That's why we get this feeling of going through a tunnel of light and then going out into a big light later. Incredible. And the feeling of love associated with it is because we're back in contact with who and what we are truly, and of course source as well as that higher self. Because
you call that true self the true energetic self, the TES, throughout the book, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, but in reality, even that's a wrong description, because although at the point of understanding the start of the process, or the start of my understanding of the process, I, like everybody else, was considering that we were pure energy beings. But what I'm now understanding is actually we're not. We're beings of pure sentience, and that we are given a body of energy to work with as part of the source's structure. But that body of sentience can decouple itself from that energy and move around and use other energies, a little bit like a sea snail or a hermit crab changes shells to a bigger shell, so to speak. We can move our sentience from one body of energies to another body of energies, and when we recouple with the body of energies, we can use that body of energies to create various different things that we want to experience. But in essence, we're sentience. We are pure sentience with a given or commandeered body of energy, and that's the true energetic self, so to speak.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you very, very much. And each chapter is as in depth as that, and much, much more in this book. So there really is a lot to gain from it. But in a sense of general sense, which it may be difficult because each chapter is so different. What do you think is some of the more the work that, in a sense, makes the present moment now an improvement for us? What information is Anne bringing through that could help us in the way that we are with each other and that we live our lives now? What is there any sort of coreness in there?
Yeah, well, there's one thing I'm being told to talk about, which is sort of the psychological effects associated with how we incarnate, and some of the things we recognise as being words that we use a lot, like twin flames or soulmates, and walk-ins, for instance. And there's a lot of psychological effects that are, from a medical perspective, classified as being mental dysfunction. But some of this mental dysfunction is true functionality because of the way we incarnate, and how we, if we're fortunate, still have aspects of our functionality still turned on, so to speak. But the thing that strikes me with all of this is the absoluteness of the knowledge that we're not the human body. It's just a temporary condition that we elect to work with to experience different experiences, and that the use of the human body, although it seems to us to be a long time, is actually just a simple moment in our existence. And so it is, when we go back to the energetic, it's like, oh, wow, well, that was it. That was that then. Let's move on to the next bit. It's that sort of thing. For the reader and for the the advanced and the advancing spiritual individual, all those who come into it and go straight into this level of understanding, it's a deeper level of detail. It's taking the woolliness out of the subject. It's giving it more of an absolute, concrete basis, foundation, rather than this, what can be classified as being, white unicorns, angels, and pixies and fairies type feeling that most people get when they talk about incarnation or existing in the afterlife, so to speak. There's no such thing as an afterlife. It's a continuation of what we were. We're just dipping into those different frequencies, and one particular frequency requires a diving suit, so to speak. If we dip into a lower frequency environment, the sea, we need a diving suit to protect ourselves, to perpetuate our physical existence. Well, this is like a diving suit in a lower frequency, and so it's giving the reader more evidence in a concrete physics sort of way, scientific sort of way, if you want to understand it in that respect, that says, everything you've heard about is right, but this is more clear. This is more in keeping with our current level of scientific understanding. This is more in keeping with our current language level, our current progressive technological level. It's simply a refocusing of what's there, rather than having it in fairy tale language that people sort of roll their eyes up into their heads and go, "Oh, okay," and they walk away. It's giving it in an absolute condition, and in some respects, this is a completely different. This is an example. This is why I, as an engineer, liked the way Barbara Brennan presented her work in energy healing. She's a scientist. She's a doctor and worked in the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in NASA, and so she was an absolute hard-nosed scientist. And then when she started to experience these different realities and the different abilities that she got, she could only explain it in hard-nosed science, and that's what drew me towards her and the students. One of her students, one of her first-generation students, that taught me, because she taught it in exactly the same way as Barbara taught it, and so having this level of clarity, of depth, of detail that we can hang our hat on is something that, for me, is going to sell this book, because it's not a case of this is White Eagle being channeled, or this is something else being channeled, or this is me talking to a now deceased partner. It's the detail behind the information that's there that gives it more credibility, so to speak. Now, there will be, of course, people who can't handle that level of detail and don't want to, and prefer to go down the other route of, the sort of love and light sort of scenario. But that's okay for them as well. They need to have that route, and they will progress in that way as well. But this, for me, is because the detail is more tangible throughout, and this is throughout the book. This is what I think is going to be the major. The unique selling point, so to speak, where it's got tangibility, it's got almost physicality to it, and although it's easy sometimes to explain in a human way, I think it has to be, because that's where we are right now. You can see that there's much more detail to it, and it is explaining the detail in the same genre as my previous works. And so it's going to satisfy the thirst for those individuals who work with that particular genre of spirituality, or metaphysics, so to speak, and help them understand the crossover points between the sort of the common and popular spirituality that people want to know more about. But this brings the popular spirituality into a level of detail that hasn't before been experienced. And I'm sure that other people have done it. I mean, I think Rudolf Steiner was very, very good at what he did, and came into being a very, very competent channeler with lots of detail. But again, at that point in time, he was presenting that detail that the mass spiritual public wasn't in the right place for it, and so he had various levels of resistance to his data. But again, he's gone to a certain level, and this is a bit more than that, so to speak. And we just keep progressing. But it's the tangibility, I think, which is the core.
Yes, absolutely.
The core aspect of it.
But there is some information in this that we have heard before, some of it, and I think that those sprinkles of some of it are there because, well, really, we never listened in the first place, and it's just repeating again what we haven't listened to. And then the same can be said for what you've just said there about some other channels, that do talk about stuff on a well, should we say lower level, simpler level, is it but a different level, yeah. And again, people seem to be attracted to that material because they haven't listened in the first place. So they may have heard it before, but they're hearing it again in a different flavor. But this work is different in a sense, in that yes, it's definitely high level stuff, most definitely. And that's great to see come through.
Yeah, and just to sort of clarify, there's nothing wrong with wanting to experience things in terms of angels and archangels and unicorns, etc. Because that's the medium we work with.
Yeah, okay. Well, what is the archangels in your opinion? When someone says this, I have a lot of angel people on working with Archangel Michael or Raphael or whatever it may be, working with the angels. What are the angels then? Is that just is that again what we spoke about earlier on, which is it's just an aspect of yourself, it's said in a way that other people can understand, but it's really you.
It's exactly the same thing. I'm just started a book called The Curators, which explains exactly what we're just talking about. It explains what the reality behind the archangels is and the other structure of beings that are supposed to be part of religious texts, etc., and also what guides are. I mean, basically, they are again functions of source. That are not part of the evolutionary cycle per se, although they still evolve, but they have other roles to do, like maintaining the structure of the environment that we work with to experience lower frequency existence. And that's their role. Their role is to maintain the evolutionary efficiency of the environment that we place ourselves into. And it can be as high as, ensuring various different interdimensional frequential states are maintained in different event spaces to throwing a few pebbles at our window to make sure that we're awake at the right time of the day, so to speak. It can be that sort of level of detail they work with. The way we understand things now is based upon old understandings.
Yes.
And although we can still use these levels of terminology, this book I'm working on now, called The Curators, is aimed at bringing it up to date, so to speak, based upon my own particular genre or understanding of what the greatest reality is. But people can have guardian angels, if you want to call them that. They're basically some of the helpers that the guides work with. There's a vast network. One of the things that comes out of the book, and will come out of this particular book I'm working on now, within the Andiology, it points out there's a vast network of disincarnate individuals who are working with us, making sure that we're in the right place at the right time, experiencing the right experiences, getting the right evolutionary content from that, working with the right other incarnate beings, and that we're all in the right places in the right time. We all benefit from each other's interaction. And so there's this huge logistics team behind us, making sure that we are on centre stage all of the time, even down to this point now where we're talking to each other. The amount of work that's gone on in the background to make sure this has happened is phenomenal. I mean, if you think that most people have got an excess of 20 or 30 helpers, and they're all working on different event spaces as well, the different peril conditions, it's phenomenal. So the network behind us is huge.
Yes.
And
yes,
this is all part of this particular book as well, explaining what that is, and the depth behind it is unbelievable. The amount of work that goes on behind us to keep us incarnate is amazing.
Yeah. Sure, go ahead.
There was there's an example. I've just been told to give and that is there's it's to do with the Air Force, the Royal Air Force, and they're saying there's one pilot flies this plane, but then there's 46 ground crew, there's 36 engineers, there's just two or three other people who work with the undercarriages, and it lists all these people in the background who are ensuring that this one person can fly this plane. It's a little bit like that, and you know the same sort of thing in the broadcasting industry. The general population can see just you speaking in a microphone, looking in a camera, but all the production people behind you, they're in the hundreds, those sorts of things. And so this is the same thing. As an example, we have a lot of individuals, a lot of other entities, other aspects of ourselves, or our higher selves, or our much bigger part of our source, as it were, what we're part of, who are also working with us to perpetuate our efficient condition whilst we're in this lowest frequency environment. And that's all part of the book as well. There's loads of different areas we could dip into, but that's understanding that the vast network of individuals helping us and supporting us is amazing. And if you want to call them angels, you can do.
Yeah.
I actually can't remember. I can't remember what I'm calling the book now. It's called the Curators: The Roles and Responsibilities of Angels and Angels, Guides, and God's Maintenance Entities. So
that is great. With that, I love it. But you definitely have had an angel in this book. With Anne coming through, and I know that she loves you very, very much. For what for just you being you, and for bringing this book through with her. I know she does.
Yeah, I'm really sort of humbled that I've been given the opportunity to access not only her energies. Post the physical demise of a human body, of a vehicle, but also to be able to use that opportunity of the continued link to be able to get information that mankind needs to know about. And if it's only one person reads the book and understands it, that's fantastic. It's one other person who's got a deeper understanding and is in a position where the fear surrounding the demise of the human body is removed. And that's something else that's important. All of the authors of all the different books associated with reporting near-death experiences and the incarnation process are doing one thing: alerting us to the fact that we exist in a much bigger environment, and we're part of a bigger being and a bigger body of energies, but also that the personality of that which we are doesn't truly demise ever. It may get added to a bigger personality, and the experiences that we experience as individualized versions of our higher self get dispersed into a bigger body of memories and experiences. But in essence, there's nothing to fear about leaving the human body. It is just a moment in our existence. It's a small and very inefficient vehicle that we're using to experience low frequencies. And this is the same thing with all of these people. They're all giving various different levels of information that people can work with and remove their fear of life, of incarnate condition. And this adds to it in a different direction, in a different level of detail.
Absolutely, and there's many of those people as well that have the near-death experience that will be addicted to the idea that it's Jesus that saved them from hell, because they've gone to hell when they've had the near-death experience, and Jesus saved them and took them back and everything. And I'm sure in the reality that they created, that did happen, but they created it, but they won't have ownership for that, and everything's outside them, and it's never them that have the power to do anything. It's all through someone else. The addictions take place, and but that those messages reach those right people at that level who need to hear that stuff, because that's where their consciousness is at, and that's not taking anything away from them. That's just where they're at, or where they need to be at.
Yeah, and this all of these functions are explained in the Andar logs. I think everybody will do it at some point. we go into the energetic with a fresh memory set and a level of programming that's associated with our current incarnate existence. And so we will create an environment, because we are ultimately able to create anything we want to once we're energetic. We'll create an environment that supports our belief system, our programming, not our knowledge-based system, although that will also be part of it as well. And so if we truly understand the knowledge behind incarnation, we will go straight back into being what we were. And there'll be none of this creating an environment, an earth-based environment around ourselves, or an environment that we're told will exist once we disincarnate. And this is something that's, and also there are people who enter into like a limbo state because they are they're programmed for whatever reason, or their own thought process tells them that nothing exists once their physical body's died. And so they go into this limbo state where they have to be sort of coerced out of these grey energies that they create about themselves. And this is also explained in the book, that why we get these near-death experiences where we see relatives as they were in human form, why we see Jesus, why we see God, why we see helpers and angels. It's because that's what we program ourselves to experience and what we expect to experience. And so therefore we create our expectation.
As a god.
It's only later when we start to understand that the reality is much more simpler than that, so to speak, that these creations around us start to fade away and we start to experience what we truly are in the way they're supposed to be experienced.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And do you think if we're a bit of a crappy person on this side, we take that with us when we cross over back home? So we may as well sort it out now. Whatever issues we have now, do you think we only take them with us when we cross?
We take a little bit of what we are because it's the last function of this particular smaller aspect of our higher self. And so we start to the personality of what we are sort of moves with us, so to speak. But when it becomes part of when eventually we move beyond this imagery we create, this environment that we create upon our expectation of what we're supposed to be when we disincarnate, starts to disappear, then that personality that's created as a function of this particular incarnation becomes dissolved or diverse or distributed and diversified, so to speak, into the much bigger personality of what our true energetic self is, and or those smaller personal personalizations of what we are as a smaller aspect of our true energetic self. And so we will take them with us, but they will become dilute as a natural function of us becoming reintroduced into what we are. It's a little bit like there's various different types of communion that we experience when we do become reintegrated with our true energetic self, and these levels of communion are also repeated if we become fully communed or partially communed with our creator. But in essence, each of those levels of communion does result in a certain level of dilution of what we are here, because those memories of what we are here are only a small part of what we truly are. It's a bit like a droplet of rain dropping into the sea. There's a moment of expansion of, wow, this is what I really am, and then dissolution.
Yeah.
But if that droplet has got more stiction, or there's a reason to keep it more individualized, then that droplet could be like a droplet of oil, for instance. And although it's part of the sea, it still stays individualized within the sea. Absolutely.
It does. Thank you. And I know we're almost out of time here right now, and I appreciate we're going over time, and I appreciate you giving us the time right now. Would you say that throughout your work and Anne's contribution now as well, neither of you want followers, do you? You don't want people addicted to your teachings, because that's what these are, teachings. How do you stop that? And are these teachings about giving power back to people and saying that you have all the ability to do all this yourself, you can channel this information yourself? Is that what your work comes to as well?
Yeah, there are always going to be people who hang on to you, and we have to work with that and sort of wean them off you very slowly. Unfortunately, certainly within the Indian society, the guru almost demands that you maintain a dependence upon them. I think there's a bit of an ego. There's a reason for that, and I understand the reason for it. But where we are now, frequentially, that reason has disappeared. It's just to do with the protection of the higher frequencies of the students, so that they can continue their own progression. But they do that through the guru without being taught how to keep themselves where they are, as it was, unless they are able to become a guru in their own right. But and I've lost my train of thought now as well. But it's in terms of understanding who and what we are. We do need to make sure that we give people the empowerment of being able to progress to our own level, and we don't make them dependent upon you. We make them independent of you. And the work I do with the Traversing of Frequencies workshop allows people to get to the level I've got to, which took me years, over a period of a few days. And for that point of view, although we do provide support functions, like there's forums people can work with, there's people can get in contact with each other, at the end of the day, the whole point is that you're given the tool, practice it, become your own guru, so to speak. You don't need to be baby fed all the time. You don't need to be attached to me or to Anne or anybody else all the time. This is all about empowering people to become what they, their own level of progression, their own guru, to be able to work out how to progress themselves and keep working with that. So although it's nice to have followers, that's an egotistical thing. And as far as I'm concerned, that if people buy the books, progress, and then throw them away or pass them on to somebody else, that's fine. It's not important to sell hundreds of thousands of books or have hundreds of thousands of followers, or that sort of stuff. If the work I've done, if all the books I ever create, and I'm told there's going to be 12 in total, only help one person, then it's done its job. Then it's done its job.
Wow, that's a beautiful stance, Guy. That's a beautiful stance to be able to say that. That really is, because I don't think many other people would always feel that way. Well, they would. No, a lot would, but there'd be some that wouldn't. But that's a beautiful. I'm not. Yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, the problem is that we can become victims of our own success, and right now I'm in the process of retracting a little bit to try and make myself less available, so to speak, whilst still being available. If that makes any sense. But it's people need to be able to work on their own, because some of the things, for instance, in China and in India, sometimes you get questions like, what food should I be eating, or what job should I go for, or is this interview going to turn out okay? This is stuff that they should be working on themselves. There's no need for us, a medium or a channeler or a reader or anybody else or a guru to do that for you. But that's the level of detail that sometimes they go into. That's the level of dependency they create with the guru. And as far as I'm concerned, people will put you on that pedestal. People will say, people will call you, their leader, their guru, their sifu, their sensei. They'll give you that status, and it's very compelling. It's very compelling, but at the end of the day, you're not helping yourself or them by accepting that level of status.
No.
It's better to say, well, I understand, but thank you, but no thanks. I can take you so far, then you're on your own. Yeah. the bird can be learnt. The bird needs to fly on its own, and that's the same with all the different people who latch onto you and then want to go further, and rather than taking responsibility for their own lives. And it's very important that people do take responsibility. They can use teachers or people who are able to give information as stepping stones. The teacher should be a stepping stone, without doubt. The teacher should be able to get students to a level that are higher than them, or better than them, or more capable than them, or more evolved than them. That's the role of the teacher, not to make millions of dollars or pounds by having all of these followers follow them or put them on a pedestal. That's for me. If anybody who goes down that route and accepts that, well, there's obviously a lesson that they're learning there, and experience that they're learning as a result of it. But it's not something I seek.
No, absolutely not. No. I mean, there are those channels out there that make a lot of money, from what they do, but then again, I suppose that there is the opposite to look at. That if they're giving out their time and information, teaching information that is currently available out there anyway, but those that come to their venues don't want to look inside and ask their own questions and seek their own advice to find these answers, then has to be an exchange of energy somewhere for that information coming through for them from someone else that could have come from them. I don't know. It's a fine situation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's easier to get somebody else to do your work for you than it is to do it yourself. That's a human, a very common human thing. My father once said to me, "Well, if you don't do it, I've got to do it, and then you've not learned how to do it." It's probably one of the most wisest things he's said, actually. but it's always stuck with me. It's people have to be taught how to do it so that they can do it themselves.
Yeah. But it still comes back to that thing, when some of these people are making so much money, I suppose it's not for us to question really too much, is that wrong or right? I suppose it's just, we've got our own stuff to get on with, but it does, I just hope it's going towards a good cause.
I'd like to think so as well. And the problem is that when people do start to generate lots of money, they get dependent on it. They create lifestyles surrounding it. And in some instances, they generate the need to have more money because of the individuals who are feeding the ego around them. So it's a shame to see that happen. And I've seen lots of really good quality spiritual leaders become engrossed and immersed in this aspect of physicality, and it's a shame.
But then
some have come out the other side.
Yeah. But then I'd like to make a shed load of money to start up my spiritual news network on my spiritual TV channel, because it's going to take that money. I wouldn't want to rely on anybody else or donations. I'd never go down that road again, or even that thinking of that road. Yeah. So to do these bigger things, it takes money. So I'm not, yes, I now at 37 don't want to experience money too much for myself to experience. I actually want to go and do something with it for a bigger picture, which wouldn't have been the case even 5 years ago potentially. Yeah. But I still need that money to be able to do these things. Now there's I'm not going out on some desperate calling to say I'm here to save people. It's just what I want to go and do. So to make that money, I've got to go make choices to whatever I'm going to do to start building. But when it comes from that aspect, maybe that I'm coming from a different aspect that I'm trying to fund a bigger picture.
Yeah, and that's fine. One can be a king and the wealthiest man in the world and still be the most spiritual individual in the world. The difference is that if you're surrounded by riches and the riches create interdependency, then as an individual we are immersed or absorbed by this level of materialism. However, we can still, if you recognise that it's just a tool, and we don't become dependent upon it, and we can literally be in a position where it doesn't drive us, it doesn't maintain us to the point where we must have more, we must have this, we must have that, then we're okay. We're okay. To say the person can be the richest person in the world and still be the most spiritual person in the world, because they know that the riches they've got don't actually mean anything. It's a material tool that can be used to achieve certain things, and that's the most important thing to realise. It's a means to an end.
I completely agree. I'd be happy with just a little room with a NAS server and a few films, one chair, or if I've got a family, obviously I've got to provide for them. But just simple, nothing but the money that I'm generating goes towards the network. It's all about pushing that message out and trying to help people and giving people's other truths out on a platform that's not fear-based, that's there to serve and higher consciousness. That is exciting to me. I completely understand where you're coming from. But I think for someone to do that, it takes you to go through life and to realize that actually everything you've said is truth for you to get to that point, because those with money would not want to do what I'm going to do. They wouldn't want to do it. As you say, it's the addiction to need more. As some of these, very wealthy people you see. But then again, they are going through life as we all are, learning different things and at different aspects and reporting back to source once they've had a debrief, just as Anne did as well. So nothing's wasted. I would like to sort of, there's so many chapters. We've now reached the end of the interview. We really have, and I'm so impressed by yourself and where the direction this interview's gone in. What would you say is the most important message of this particular book, the Anne Diaries? Dialogues, sorry.
The Anne Dialogues. That we are ultimately responsible for everything that we do, and that we continue to work with that level of responsibility, both in the incarnate and disincarnate state, and that it's a big responsibility. Experiencing, learning, and evolving is a big responsibility, not only for ourselves, but the bigger part of ourselves, and that other bigger part of ourselves that we call Source, and the bigger part of that, which is called Origin. It's all about being responsible for what we're doing. And for me, that's the most important thing that comes out is that we are ultimately responsible for everything that we do, whether we are a small aspect of our higher self or whether we are in fact just the higher self itself. Even when we incarnate, everything we do here we're responsible for, and if we take ownership for it, then there's no problems at all. The thing I've noticed is that when we start to disassociate ourselves from ownership, then we start to perpetuate the need to keep coming back to an incarnate state to try and clear that level of dysfunctional thinking, so to speak. And so it's more important to recognize that we have the ability to change every direction that we're going in, provided we are responsible for it. And we talked about being put on pedestals and people sort of demanding time and people wanting to be told everything for them rather than do it themselves. All of this is an example of how not to be, because ultimately we need to be responsible for everything that we do. And so everything we experience is an example. Everything that we see is an example. Everything that we do is an example, irrespective of whether we think it's right or wrong. There's no right or wrong, it's just experience. But if we can turn that experience into one-off experiences and we learn and evolve from it straight away, then we take responsibility for moving in that direction, which is difficult to do. It's really difficult to do. Then we will reduce the number of incarnations we need to have here, and we will evolve in a much faster way. And that's the whole point. Experience it once, move on.
Absolutely.
Not experienced it 7 or 8 times.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you there. And the website for this book as well.
Well, right now it's a page on my website. It's www.beyondthesource.org. And if you go to the books tab and then scroll down, you'll see the hand dialogues there. And there's a couple of pages there from the start of the book. I might add or change them over a little bit in a few days' time or weeks' time, just to sort of change the flavour there, because people that's been up there now for quite a few months now. It probably needs to change. But in essence, it's just an example of the start of the book. I might just cut and paste a couple of other pages there to allow people to see a bit more content, a bit more detail there.
Excellent. And you are also available for reading still?
Yeah, I'm also available for readings. I've actually got a full diary. I do space my time out, so I have a day for readings, or time for readings, and time for doing the book work, and time for doing human stuff, and time for doing workshops. But if people want to book a reading or a healing, they can do via the website as well. There's again, if you go onto the website www.beyondthesource.org, and Beyond the Source is one word, and then look at readings and healings on that tab, and then come down. You can see it all there. I mean, at the very start of the website, there's like a banner that rotates left to right. If you click on the home part, you can get to the rest of the website and see these different access points.
Excellent. Well, we've been putting your website and your information about yourself on the screen throughout this interview, and your books, and your latest book, of course. And I just want to say, Guy Neela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for asking me to be on your show, Kevin. Thank you for asking me to talk about the AND dialogues. And it's very exciting to be able to talk about it. Looking forward to it finally finding its way into paper or electronic version. And thank you for allowing me to talk about the other subjects surrounding it as well. It's been an absolute pleasure and a delight, Kevin. Thank you.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.